The foundation repair industry is the most sophisticated industry in the world.
What do you think 2026 is going to look like in terms of home services? Or are we going to see major consolidations?
What's happened kind of in the consolidation space is that
If you were advising, like, say, a $3 to $10 million home service company, what would you be telling them?
number one, I think, is
What are some of like the top 5 things that we need to, as contractors, dive into before even considering an LOI?
what I would say is
Could you say what you think, which trades are going to see some of the fastest growth in terms of valuation?
how we deliver that solution is changing, and you got to basically adapt and change.
Welcome to Beers with Contractors.
Terry, man, you are back, my man. You feeling better?
Feeling so much better, Will.
I'm glad, dude. If you're calling out sick, boy, something's bad. Listen, if you were just hungover, you could have said so.
No, that would have, was that before or after? No, that would have been after Thanksgiving. No,
Oh,
I was down for the count for at least 3 days, and this is how bad it was. I did not drink for at least 5 days. You know,
no.
2 post days recovery. Ugh, it was hard.
Well, that's all right. You know, if you'd stop licking doorknobs, Neanderthal, you'd be fine.
Well,
But,
I have 2 beautiful young children, and at that age, they bring home all the illness from the community.
Well, it is that time of year. So I'm glad to have you back, buddy. I missed you. We had a great time in your absence. Things went so smooth. I totally messed with all of your equipment. And for any of you guys out there that want to see, last episode was a Q&A episode, had a lot of fun, and I messed with all of Terry's equipment, moved into my studio that I built that we're still having echo problems out of. But I had a great time. And man, what a time to be alive.
It is.
So, last month of the year, man, we are off to the races. Businesses, man, if you are not getting your goals done or have them ironed out and your budget set for next year, boy, you got some work to do. The timer is off. And today's guest is actually going to be a cool little mix it up because our guest, Terry, I don't know if you remember, but this is one of our OG guests that was on with us all the way back when we were a young, budding podcast in March of this year. Which we are now up from 4 listeners to 6 listeners, I think, according to Drake and all of his metrics and schematics and things that he pulls in the background. But man, this one's always fun when I talk to this guy because we get to see each other around the country at different events and conferences. He's always got the know-how, knows what's going on in the financial world for contractors, and dude knows everybody. It's so
Nice.
cool. So, and I know you remember him, but yeah, our guest today, Christian Olson from Footprint Capital. And for those that did not catch the last episode, and Footprint Capital is an independent investment bank focused on owners and operators or privately held middle market companies. He's primarily responsible for leading deal execution and business development efforts focused on transportation, logistics, distribution, industrial, B2B software. Man, the resume goes on and on and on. 15 years of diverse experience. Held roles in both mergers and acquisitions operations, focused specifically on selling deals anywhere from, get this, Terry, $10 million to $200 million in the home service spaces. You talk about like the new wealth generators of our time, our contractors. So that's why I love talking to Christian because he supports that too. But man, still making moves in HVAC, waterproofing, plumbing, and electric. Christian, cheers
Absolutely.
to you, sir.
yes,
And glad to have you back. Of course, we've had beers all over the country in between podcast episodes.
Yeah.
But
got to see you in the flesh in Indianapolis. It was exciting.
yeah, so now before we get into some questions, because dude, we got some really cool questions because you are so progressive in what the hell's going on in the market, what's going on with tech, what's going on with where the money's flowing for construction and home services. But like, let's back up a little bit. For those that don't know you, give us a brief overview of how you got into Footprint Capital, where you started, and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if anybody watched the football game this weekend, I say the football game because I went to the Ohio State. I did my MBA there back in from 2009 to 2010. And, I'm originally from Minnesota. So I'm a Big Ten fan. The Gophers, they did have a really good win over Wisconsin this weekend. So that was fun to see. But, that's the state of hockey. So that's kind of what I grew up playing and following. And then when you move to Buckeye country, you either have to go with them or against them. And so,
Yeah, they
it's
kick you
one of the
out
things-
after 5
Yeah,
years, right?
exactly. Yeah, you can't live in Columbus and not be a Buckeyes fan.
Hey,
And like beer too. So,
Yeah.
Yes.
all those things kind of go hand in hand. So I started, I was on the buy side doing corporate M&A work for an intermodal logistics company, which ended up being fired by XPO, left that role, went over to Ashland Chemical and worked in their kind of corporate development group, found myself, running, did that for a few years with inside of Ashland across the globe, evaluating all different types of M&A projects and capital improvement projects, et cetera. And then ended up running a business too. So I kind of had some M&A, the financials, the operational experience. And then, kind of third time was the charm as Ashland was kind of converting themselves or transforming themselves into a specialty chemical company. And the division that they had in the office they had here was not that. I was adhesives and I was running I was in the adhesives division running, about $100 million kind of global P&L for structural adhesives in building and construction. So structural adhesives for engineered wood, for panel lamination, and then also too like commercial roofing. Ashland was a private label producer of all the bonding adhesive for low slope commercial roofing. So,
Okay.
got the chance to go to a Boise Cascade engineered wood plant and on the roofs of a bunch of low slope roofing and how to lay down EPDM and TPO and all that sort of good stuff. So, and then in 2019, joined up with Footprint. We're a small group at the time. So I kind of said, hey, you know what? I'm in between jobs at the time. Like, hey, what do you guys have? What are you doing? Well, it turns out they had an intermodal transportation company that they, had just signed up that we were working on a sell side engagement. So I kind of led that one. Obviously, kind of knowing that whole industry, that was a logical fit. So we did that deal successfully. And then another one came up, which was a small plumbing and drain business up in the Akron and Canton area in Ohio.
I know this deal, a small
Yeah.
one. I know this one. Yeah, a small one.
Yeah.
Hey, we'll have to dig into that one if you're allowed to talk about it. Because
Yeah.
boy,
So
what a
this
success
was,
story.
this was back to 2019, 2020, right before COVID. So everything is expired, but long and the short of it is it was like $6.5-7 million of revenue. And it was a friend of a friend and said, hey, can we, want to transition the business? Well, start sniffing around a little bit and came across Heartland Home Services. And which for those of you that don't know that out there, Heartland kind of went on, it was owned by a really big private equity group. We sold this business. This was their 7th acquisition onto this quote unquote kind of platform. They then turned around, 3-4 months later and then transacted with a big private equity group called the Jordan Company, which then they went on to acquire 50 some, brands after that. And so,
Yeah.
we kind of, sat, by luck or coincidence or however you handle it, that was kind of the first foray into, hey, what's going on in home services? And so then it was, that we did, it's kind of one leads to another. And, all said now over the course of the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 years, we've done probably, 20 or so different type of contracting businesses in and around home services and foundation repair, HVAC, large HVAC equipment, even on the commercial side, distributors, kind of anything that touches, building products, construction, home services. And then, and now too, kind of, we talk about this in terms of looking at trends, there's a lot of emphasis and focus now on the commercial segment as there's just a lot of tailwinds, coming down to play. Terry, I'm sure you're aware of kind of, anything that we're marketing an electrical contracting business right now. Let's see, the union shop is commercial, lots of tailwinds in electrical contracting. So those electricians out there, you couldn't have found a better spot to be in.
Not right now.
Yeah.
So Christian, from that point of view, what do you think 2026 is going to look like in terms of home services? Or are we going to see major consolidations? Are we going to see trends continue? What are you seeing from that point or that position?
That's a perfect question. And one of the things that, kind of what, and it's been hard to connect with Will over the last, several months. I've been spending a lot of time on the road, actually. I was, went to, I think a lot of the listeners know who Tommy Mello is. So I went out to his event in Vegas, followed by the Service Titan Pantheon. I went to a Microsoft Dynamics convention. I was just at the foundation repair with, FRS, Foundation Rescue Supply, kind of learning about what they're looking, the industry trends. So kind of soaking it all in. And what I would say is, what's happened kind of in the consolidation space is that at first, kind of go back to 2020, 2021, there was this like, hey, if it's kind of like, if it's got a pulse, we're going to buy it. And so, if there's EBITDA on there, we're going to buy it and we're going to pay whatever for it. We don't care. Because when at that time in the economy, right, like debt was essentially free from a borrowing perspective. So when it doesn't cost you anything, hey, we're just going to buy it.
Yeah.
And we borrow at, near kind of zero or really low interest rates. And then, we can kind of stack. But now as interest rates have crept up and kind of the economy feels a little bit more normal from a interest, growth kind of, well, this is what they say, but, perspective in terms of, hey, this is kind of quasi normal. What's happened and what's transpired is a lot of these, platforms have gotten big and the consolidators have, again, it's kind of slowed down their M&A pace with a focus on kind of operating and making the investments in technology and basically kind of, I don't know, say the better word for it is like digesting, all the acquisition activity. And so the market's still there, but the criteria and the analysis and in order to kind of get a deal done for, the value that, a seller wants to get versus a buyer wants to pay, that gap is widened. And so what you're seeing is kind of a doubling down on, if you're a seller, the best thing I can recommend is like, hey, you gotta, not worry about kind of this external stuff in terms of what's going on or, my buddy got this or this business sold or that business sold or whatever. It's like, hey, what am I doing internally to grow this business? And, again, we'll talk about technology, putting in that CRM, that ERP system, right? The KPIs, the different, now we'll call it, instead of just using, I think the first question is like, hey, are you using ServiceTitan? Just I'm kind of going back to the HVAC and plumbing market, right? Well, now everybody's using ServiceTitan, it seems like. So now it's like, what else are you using? What's your tech stack look like? And that's kind of that's the term that's being thrown around, at a lot of these shows is like, all right, so I'm using ServiceTitan and am I using, a schedule engine? Am I using this add-in for AI answering? Am I using, Rilla, Chirp? Like, there's all these tools out there, third-party add-ins that have been written and developed out of the ServiceTitan platform to enable efficiency. What is that? Am I using that? Because when a buyer gets in the deal and they're looking at this, they're like, all right, well, you went it.
No, it did. And what it sounds like is regardless of if you're positioning yourself for private equity to come in, or you're just trying to run a good business, the steps are going to be the same to make yourself attractive to private equity or just to operate a business well, is make sure you're efficient and taking those next steps to grow.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm disappointed. I'm not seeing the fully depreciated or EBITDA shirt on Christian. I know it's cold in Ohio, but last time you had it, we talked in Indianapolis recently. I think you had one like I got a spreadsheet for that or something like that. Or freaking cheap.
Yeah, I know. I apologize, guys. It's chilly here today. It's we're down in the 20s, and we're supposed to get some snow tonight. So I kind of bundle up.
You missed Terry making fun of me because I'm a wimp when it comes to cold weather, and I was bitching about it before the show today.
I did not use the word wimp. I said wuss. I want you to be correct.
And I love it because I know Drake bleeps all these out, but he said, "You motherfucker, you are such a fucking wuss." And so that'll be a good beep, beep, beep on our mix down. So we were just recently, were you in Chicago, Christian? I couldn't remember.
I was not. I was I think that was when Pantheon was or when
that's right. You were at Pantheon. I was in Chicago, but I was in a breakout panel with 3 other owners that led a succession in their business. I was one. I have a unique circumstance in mine. They had ones in theirs. One sold to a vendor, one to private equity. I obviously worked with a family office, and those are 3 separate journeys. It revealed to me how many contractors, they see what it is on these group forums on Facebook and things like that, but they have no clue what private equity is. And this wasn't in our questions today, but I think we should really narrow that up. Just set a clear crayon definition because people are hearing it a lot, but not a large amount. But I'd say, 60% of contractors, they just think it's a cash out and they don't even understand how it works. So let's just break that down first.
Yeah. No, and so I'll kind of start, private equity in terms of a definition or a term is basically, again, you've got investors, business operators, people that have, been in kind of, whether it be on the, most of the private equity guys, to be honest with you, like a lot of them start their careers on the sell side. helping advise and sell businesses, right? It's kind of the first tour of duty because you get a lot of reps and it helps you kind of like, define all the terms. And basically, on the sell side, what you're doing is you're positioning the business to the way that the investors or the buyers are looking to buy the business, right? And so then you have, a potential investor or a buyer of the business, could be a strategic, kind of like you talked about the vendor, maybe the family office, kind of, Will, that you mentioned. And then you have what I'd call private equity, and private equity is nothing but more than a term of, investors are raising private capital, whether that be through, family offices, pension funds, endowments, state teachers retire. My wife's a teacher here in Ohio, state teacher retirement plan. I mean, they've got a portfolio of assets, and just kind of at a broad stroke, they basically kind of divvy that up just like how you would on a, personal financial level, like, hey, equities, bonds, real estate. And then they have this little sliver, which is like, alternative assets, right? Or alternative investments. And that's quote unquote kind of private equity or venture capital. So they'll allocate those to fund managers or managers of they're investing in privately held companies. Venture capital is, they're investing in the market is kind of how I define it. And a good term from a grand definition is like, hey, they're investing in big markets, right? Like they're already like past investing in AI. Like now private equity is investing in AI because it's real and it's actually generating cash flow.
Yeah.
But a couple of years ago, they're investing in AI and these big thematic approaches, right? And then you've got private equity, which in a traditional sense is investing in cash flow based businesses. And so the investors could be the family office directly now. They could be the fund managers. I mean, there's all different flavors of private equity. And, that's kind of one of the things and where we sit is we sit at that kind of, we're that conduit. Like we have all different flavors kind of in our Rolodex, if that's still a thing, I should say CRN, of all these different types of buyers that are looking to invest in home services businesses or, just buy businesses and hold them and grow them, et cetera. So that's kind of private equity at the top level.
Yeah. Well, and that's good. And it's funny you mentioned about like AI and stuff, because I was talking to somebody the other day and it was fitting because it popped up and they're like, oh, we're in an AI bubble. And it's literally like, no, we're not. Hell, even Jerome Powell mentioned this from the Fed. He was like, the difference between like the .com bubble versus now is like half those companies they weren't real.
Yeah.
But these like AI companies, they have financial models. They are producing profits. They are generating revenue. And we like to think, oh, well, that's AI. That's an emerging technology. But home services is doing the same damn thing right now, which is cool because I know we're going to talk about why there's so much money coming to home services now and why I think it's the biggest opportunity in home services there ever has been or will be.
Oh, yeah.
But, with that comes a lot of poor managers into this space. So there's a lot of PE firms getting into home services. And what are several of the ones that you would say, as somebody that may be looking at selling, what's some of the red flags that this PE firm really isn't in their space, or they don't understand how this works, or maybe not have a success ratio? I mean, give us some advice there.
Yeah. So that's one thing that, when we have a client engagement, that's kind of our job, right? Is to, we're kind of going out on behalf of our client, the seller, the business owner, saying, all right, there's the number changes all the time, but roughly let's just call there's 70, if you're an HVAC, company or a plumbing company, I mean, there's 70 consolidated private equity platforms out there of all different sizes.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them, right? And
you go back 4 or 5 years, Christian. I mean, how many were there then?
40 to 50. 30, there's
so it's
so it's been growing. Like at first it was like the Gettles and some of the ones the early ones that kind of started the kickoff of this consolidation. And really, what enabled all that was the technology, right? Like now you can manage multi-location. The carbon paper's gone away, right? Like, having to log in and VPN into, your QuickBooks and plug in an invoice and, everybody's on this technology, right? So, that allowed these businesses to scale and basically run it, so you could consolidate and run different operations from, Oklahoma, all the way up to Ohio. You could have them all on the same type of system, communication, et cetera, right? So that you can replicate the business model at each location. And now, where this is all coming to is like, hey, with this AI, I can, I even heard a stat, Will, to kind of go on your point, like AI is going to help the industry as a whole. Like, I think kind of just, and I'm talking like HVAC, right? Or but home services in general, run somewhere between 15 to 20% EBITDA margin. I mean, there should be a 5 to 10% pickup because of AI. And that's on the back office, the enablement, et cetera. And I even heard a stat in talking to somebody where, some version of an AI was able to take a call center from, 60 down to 90.
Yeah.
As an example. And that's not like, hey, we're coming in and firing, but like, I mean, you guys know, like, turnover in the CSR position is, 30, 40, 50%. Well, I put this AI in, and now as it gets trained and gets better, I just don't need to rehire.
Oh yeah, but also the opposite, where it's like if you're a small company, you don't have to hire all those people.
Exactly.
You got one person, you can scale to what an older company would take 6. So I think that's the opportunity for the small guys.
100% agreed. And you couldn't be more true. It's like, hey, there's that on the cost saving side and the efficiency side. But, like to your point, I mean, you go back, this is like one of the best times. And I even had this conversation. I've had it several times with whoever I'm talking to on the other line. This is probably the best time, at least that I've seen in my career. And I'm kind of mid 40s, like, to start a business. It's never been easier because, all the tools are out there. I can CRM one touch, if I bill it, I mean, I could basically start a home services company out of my house, or I shouldn't say that because I don't know how to do the stuff, but with the right people,
there is that.
Yeah.
You do need to know.
Hold on, just chat
I got all the
GPT,
AI
Christian.
stuff
You'll
covered,
figure
but I
it
don't have
out.
the trade stuff covered. So like,
Yeah, Christian, that's never stopped Will from anything.
well, I know that.
Hey, man. When I started learning code, I wish I had ChatGPT. I just had YouTube, bro.
Yeah, exactly. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, but no, that's a good sign because I think there's a few different things that show that there's major consolidation in home services for the investment aspect, for mergers and acquisitions. But what are the big asterisks or telltale signs that you're seeing for 2026 being a major consolidation in home services through private equity?
After going to several of these conferences kind of in the fall and kind of in the preparatory of like, kind of hear the AI was coming and, anytime that there's kind of like a blip where we had like the tariff stuff, right? And that changes, kind of some of the macro dimension. Well, what took over that was AI, right? And people started to say, all right, well, if my cost of goods are getting more expensive, I need to look at ways to look at other ways to find and grow. And, with all the AI tools now that are coming to fruition and their work, you're seeing that as kind of the biggest kind of driver towards, what's going to ignite the consolidation rate. And I would say too, if we can get, we've been hearing bits and pieces of it, but if we can get a slight rate cut, a quarter, half a point, that's going to really kind of trigger a lot of the people that have been, deals are still getting done. It's just getting at a slower pace. It's going to create a more competitive environment. Let's put it that way. And so what that's going to do is it's going to drive up value.
So, Christian, if you were advising, like, say, a $3 to $10 million home service company, what would you be telling them to fix before private equity would be a consideration in any of the conversations that they're having?
Ladies, running your small business can be demanding. You got suppliers you got to work with. You're managing crews. Hell, you're chasing sales. It's a lot to take in. Listen, if you want to grow your business, you got to stop working in it and you got to start working on it. So that's where my friends at Foundation Rescue Supply come in. You're not just getting foundation repair products and waterproofing products and air quality control products. With their nationwide distribution, you're getting a partner who knows how to help you scale. And that's why I use them. The Foundation Rescue Supply team has industry knowledge that'll help make your life easier. You get the tools, the trainings, the systems that you need to move the needle. You want your sales team to close more leads? Done, because they have the proven process for that. You need your crews to work smarter, not harder? Done. Their installation training will get you out there and rocking and rolling in the field. With Foundation Rescue Supply, you're not just buying materials here. You're buying a better business system that they have helped create. And you sell more, you install more, and you grow your team. So the bottom line is this: you get best industry pricing, you get field productivity on track, and you get more revenue out of everybody on your team. So this is your chance to step up, scale up, and thrive. If you are ready to make that happen, head to foundationrescuesupply.com. Check out their catalog and speak to my friends, their team, how you can take beyond the products with your company with Foundation Rescue Supply.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Well, number one, I think is, and you're going to get this day one is like, why do you want to sell? And so, having that answer,
I
like,
want to make money. That's
yeah, and that's not
no,
the
no.
bad answer, but
I know, but it is one of those where, man, you know this, Christian. There's
yeah,
so many people are just like they're so money hungry. But it's like that's not going to bring happiness to anybody. You know how that goes. But sorry,
yeah,
and I know we should talk about that on the other side of the sale, what that looks like. But go ahead. Sorry.
No, absolutely. But I think the one thing to mention is like is having that succession plan, and I think we run into I'd say well over 75% of the deals that we get involved with, there's an ownership dynamic where the business is still relying on the owner. And so the farther you can, start to distance yourself away from, that chair and being the guy, the more successful, number one, the business is going to be set up for success, post closing, but it also, kind of overcomes that hurdle of the reliance on quote unquote the owner, right? Because the owner may have in his mind like, hey, my buddy, he sold his business and, and he's golfing every day. Why can't I do that? Well, it goes back to, we talked about it, right? The country club multiple. It's like, it's a multiple, right? I mean, there's all these different factors that go in, you got one guy that's over, playing golf all the time and enjoying that. And then the other one that's still working. And in order to kind of get to play golf, well, he's basically built a management team and a management system that allows for scale so that he's removed himself instead of, and everybody's heard this, right? You don't want to be working, in the business, you want to be working on the business. And, what does that really mean? Well, I think the biggest thing that we see as the owners and our clients is like, hey, you need to be out like having these conversations. If it's a buddy, if you're a foundation repair guy, and well, this kind of goes back to, when I was at the show with you, it was like, there's a lot of like people in foundation repair that don't know who Tommy Mello is.
Mm-hmm.
And, and these types of people in other different industries, it's a home service industry, but they haven't, heard of them, but it's networking and it's checking out like, hey, what's the garage door guy in my town doing? If I'm foundation repair, he's doing home service, he's doing garage doors. Well, there's a couple little nuggets that he's probably doing that, that you could share, that he could share with you and you could share with him and kind of building that networking type of, arrangement across trades, not just, inside of a specific vertical, because I think everybody gets too very like myopic. It's like, all right, well, this guy's doing this because I need to do this, but Tommy's over here, using X, Y, and Z, and he's going from 0 to 250 million, and I'm going from 0 to 2 million, or from 1 to 2 million. There's a different approach, right? And it's kind of making sure that you're aware and educating yourself on all those different possibilities. And that's what we talk about kind of working like, on the business is putting that type of stuff in place. And that's what really translates to value. And then also too, we've talked about this before is the culture is super important, right? You want everybody on the same page. You're investing in a team, it's service business, it's people, right? I mean, we've seen it so many times where, hey, the check is stroked and, 20-30% of people like leave out the door, the next day when the new owners come in because they're just not the right fit. Well, that's you as the seller, like, hey, that's a culture issue, right? Like you got to have your group prepped for, hey, this is where we want to go. If we want to be a lifestyle business and just kind of erp along at $5 million, which is fine. But if the goal is to go from 5 to 10 and bring on an investor to grow this thing and dominate a marketplace, you got to have the team that's willing to step up and be ready to do that. And that's a different type of individual than somebody that is just looking, say, for that, 40-hour-a-week job, kind of collecting a paycheck.
Now, Will, I'd ask that question of you is we are in very different aspects. And I know whenever I look at anyone involved in real estate, there's something I can always learn from them, be it the size, the scale, it doesn't really matter. I can pick something up. In home service, do you look at, or has it always been where you could look at someone doing something completely different, say plumbing, electric, still in home service, and say, I can learn from them and I can pick up tools or tricks that are going to make my business better?
Oh yeah, constantly. And I think that's, to be clear, to add some flavor, I'll say it. We won't let Christian say it. The foundation repair industry is the most sophisticated industry in the world. It's up there with like athletics and fashion and AI and all that. But we're known for being stuck in our little corner where we only go to our industry specific events, right? And the fact is I'm blessed enough to know, like, well, people like Christian and actually our podcast guests have broadened my horizons, my performance customers. Hell, actually just getting to speak at different conferences like roofing. Roofing is going crazy right now. It's just wild. And it's like, wait a minute, roofing? We think of that in Oklahoma, but nationwide, like that industry is expanding. And I've talked to people all over the place and I'm like, I never thought I would never would have considered measuring that KPI. But then I hear it from a plumber or, well, like Roger Wakefield was on our podcast way back. And, we get to talk about plumbing, how he grew his business there. It's just, you talk about somebody that has gone way far above and beyond just on how to expand your business using social media.
Yeah.
Oh, Christian. We know a mutual person, another Christian Rattan or Rattan?
Yep. Ratton.
Yeah, Rattan.
Five-star.
Dude, this guy, Terry, one of his major lead sources is influencer marketing. Like, wait a minute, what? You find a local influencer? And they're like, yeah, we find them they review restaurants and businesses. And then we build a relationship with them. And then they give us a spot and we get leads. And I'm like, this is crazy. Yeah. But now I'm considering it for my business. You would never hear that in foundation repair. So,
Yeah.
So Christian, when is the Footprint Capital National Conference where we're inviting everybody?
Ooh. Can we have a
thinking
booth?
about that.
We need a booth.
I've been
dude,
doing my tour of duties, and there's enough there that like I said, it's the marketing, it's the the social media, it's the sponsorship of the local teams and events and all that sort of stuff. And again, I can't keep track of them all. My kids are on all of them; they know all about this stuff. But making sure that you're like being seen and your brand is being seen, right? And it's even to like having that brand, right? And and no offense to any of our listeners out there, but R&R, R&J, J&D, like.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
initial brands with just initials. Nobody knows what they are.
Right. Yep.
And I say that.
Yeah.
Vesta is our brand. It sounds cool. Nobody knows what the hell it is. Terry, do you know what Vesta Foundation Solution? What Vesta is?
No. Please don't hold it against me.
Is the Roman goddess that protects home and hearth. Do you know how many of my customers know that?
Yes, I do. Zero.
Yeah.
None.
It sounded good, but it's cost me a lot of money to
Wait a minute. You've been around longer than AI. So how did you come up with that? Because that sounds like something AI would have gave to me.
Well, I think a lot of home services people would fall victim to this too, but the idea came from my oldest son when at the time he was 9 years old. No, 11 years old. And I loved it. I was like, that's creative as can be, buddy. Now go away. No, I didn't say that. But anyway, we've chiseled out a space in the market. We tell our story. We sell well. We have systems and processes. But, I mean, we've had Dan Antonelli on our podcast.
Yes.
And, dude, it's like I could have done so much better in our branding. So I'm glad to hear you say that, Christian, because, yes, I do not get it. Like JSM and enterprises and landscaping and roofing. Yeah. And it's like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Have you had to have that conversation, Christian, with somebody like, hey, bro, like I'd love to help you out selling your business, but you got to change your name?
So, no, I mean, it not necessarily. However, we're taking a lot of, there's a piece to this now as, like I said, kind of coming out of the last couple of years where there wasn't this huge, M&A, boom, right? And it's been a little slow. So it's like, hey, I want to sell for this. And so what are the steps you need to take? And that would be one of the check boxes, right? Is like, hey, depending upon your hold time or what you want to do, like, hey, this may be the time to like, hey, let's reinvent ourselves and build that brand. and start reinvesting around that, to drive awareness and to build that legacy that somebody else can kind of take over, because that does add value.
Yeah.
If you have initials in your name or, that type of thing, I mean, the chances of that brand being around, in 5 years from there after a transaction, I mean, you can't be like, hey, I'm selling my business, but you can't change my brand. And that's just, you gotta kind of face the, it's kind of the reality of the market, right? Is like somebody's gonna want to grow this. And, we have the same thing, like, up here in Ohio, right?
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't believe how many Buckeye, Buckeye landscaping, Buckeye waterproofing, Buckeye plumbing, Buckeye heating. Like, I mean, it's everything Buckeye. Well, all right. Well, what happens when you want to go to Cincinnati and Kentucky and expand? You just, you're limiting yourself to, well, quite honestly, with Buckeye, probably Columbus. Type of a thing. But thinking about the brand choice and then also too, like investing around that brand, you want to make sure it's something that's going to be, scalable and can grow, based on kind of what you're offering. So there's a lot of that comes into play as well.
Well, you mentioned a checklist before. That's one of the boxes that need to be checked, because I think you and I both speak to a lot of contractors out there that the multiple is like the new flex, but a lot of them don't even know what's incorporated into that multiple. And a lot of it's a garage sale back and forth, but what are some of like the top 5 things that we need to, as contractors, dive into before even considering, even entertaining an LOI?
Yeah. Well, so number 1 would be understanding your financials and the terminologies that, is going to come in that LOI. And then, which is, goes back to our old, the EBITDA and learning that. And now with AI, it's even easier to be like, hey, you could just pop your financials into AI, into a model, and be like, all right, what's my EBITDA? And it'll come pretty close. It won't tell you like, all right, what's going to increase my EBITDA? What's going to decrease my EBITDA? And, we call it like marketing EBITDA. What are we going to be selling the business, and marketing the business under, right? So I would say, top 5, number 1, financials, but those are, that's kind of the output of the next 4, which is the branding, the marketing, knowing, your leads coming in, right? Like, what's your lead count? What are your conversions? What's my booking rate? Am I converting from the call to an actual conversion, which, would be some sort of a sale, an upsell, rather than just the standard service call. And then, on the execution side, am I able to maximize my revenue with, do I have a tool or do I have somebody in place that could be like, what we're seeing now is that there's with AI and some of the stuff that I've seen is like, you're able to basically, the demand's not the issue. Because we've got all these leads. Everybody, I was at the show, right? It's like leads. Everybody wants these leads. Well, demand is coming in, right? Everybody's got the leads. Now it's like, how do we execute on those leads and closing percentage on the sales side? But then as you look more on the HVAC side, because that's more of a demand response side, if that call's coming in from a dripping, faucet, or let's just take a hot water heater or a furnace as an example. And, there's technology out there that, if you already, if they're a member of your service, do you have their equipment logged in your Service Titan or in your CRM, right? So I know that I'm going out to a 10-year-old piece of equipment. I mean, there's a good opportunity that this thing is, is on the fritz, right? And may need another one. So instead of putting, Johnny, my greenhorn, that's just randomly on the schedule and he's available to go check it out. Well, I'm going to put, my closer, the guy that knows how to diagnose and prescribe the best solution. I mean, now we're taking a service call that could be a service call, right? Or do a little fix. And now we basically had that conversion, right? So it's kind of matching the demand with the supply of techs and filling in the capacity side of it, right? And so that's kind of the way that I see what's going to drive that financial performance. And there's, the AI tools are doing that because it knows that, Johnny just started, he's only got X amount of hours in, he can only, perform these certain jobs. So like, versus like, Bill, who's like been with us a long time, he's an expert in the field, he's fully certified. We want to make sure we send him, and take him off of that, take him off of the nuisance call or whatever. So eliminating, all your nuisance calls and just getting down to the core of like serving the customer with the right tech and the right solution is basically, that's the execution, and that's going to drive value.
Well, and I would think, like, even if you don't have it perfect, but you're trying to track them, it's still more attractive to a buyer than if you don't have it at all.
Yeah.
I loved it. I had a company here last week, actually 2 weeks ago, wanting to entertain a partner, and they brought me some financials, and they brought me an accrual copy and a cash copy. And I'm like, why did he bring me two versions? And they're like, well, we're kind of in between. And I'm like, I'm not the right fit for you guys. Because obviously that's just me. That's not
Yeah.
all buyers. It's just like, yeah, if you're not even accrual accounting, we're going to have a hell of a time tying up our financials together because, you're not
Yeah.
tracking inventory properly, things like that. So,
Well, and Will, to your point, I mean, the buyer is going to want to buy a business where they really don't have to do, I mean, they want to see the financials, like they would show up, like they would see a monthly report on their P&L when they're doing their review. So like, getting those financials in shape, doing accrual based accounting, especially too, what kind of trips a lot of people up is like on these maintenance programs, right? Because, whether it's like a
oh, yep.
monthly or an annual, like, I mean, if it's an annual fee of $200, well, that's actually like, you got to divide that by 12.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a liability until you actually do the work. So-
Don't bring in balance sheets. We're going to lose 2 listeners, Christian.
Yeah, I know. But as an example,
Christian, if you were to look and look into your crystal ball and say over the next year or 2 years, could you say what you think which trades are going to see some of the fastest growth in terms of valuation? Has it been just across the board, or has it been specific areas of the market?
I think, especially too, like, maybe if we just kind of focus on foundation repair as an example, right? Kind of, the consolidation and, what Groundworks has done, for those of the, the listeners that know that space, I mean, they've kind of made everybody aware that, there is a solution to my problem. And I
Mhm.
think, that's an example where, that's a positive impact, and that kind of creates a bigger pie for everybody. Right. And so, from that perspective, so that's like a good thing. And I would say even too, like in the HVAC, what we're seeing, Terry, to your question is like, the ones that haven't sold and kind of quote unquote kind of thought they missed the boat, if you will, what they've been able to do is absorb, understand, and kind of will to your point too, like, hey, we talked about networking across trades, right? Like, going and having a discussion with a investment banker like ourselves, or having a conversation with a couple buyers, you're going to pick up something, right? And you're going to learn. And, what we've seen is like, quite honestly, the privately held businesses, the smaller guys, quote unquote, that were small a couple of years ago that, maybe missed the boat on an acquisition or weren't ready to sell, or thought, hey, I want to do this. Well, now they've got access to all the tools, and they basically have the playbook, because it's all available, through, various podcasters and kind of the discussions in the community. So now all these businesses are doing really well. And quite honestly, just like a small, kind of David versus Goliath, like the small businesses can move a lot quicker and a lot more efficient than the corporate, kind of behemoths and the consolidators. So, there's a lot of wealth and brand value that these guys have been able to kind of come in and grow. So I think you're going to see like a lot of the privately held businesses, over these next couple of years, if they embrace the tools, the technology, and the systems that are all out there, and a lot of the private equity guys are using. It's kind of capitalism 101. It's entrepreneurship, right?
Mhm.
And there's still a lot of people that, want to do business with that family business where they know who the owner is. So as a consultant kind of in the industry, it's like, hey, take that and run with it if you're the owner of a business. Like, but also too, there's a lot there because like you may have grown up in the trade side of it, right? That's where you need to surround yourself with people that know the business side of it, right? And kind of help you overcompensate for some of the weaknesses. And that's where, we all kind of can come in to help say, hey, if you, targets say, I want $10 million is my number, and I'm at, 5 million of revenue now, south of $1 million of EBITDA. Well, let's figure out a way to get there. And, have you talked to this person? Have you put this in, KPIs, like all the sort of stuff you want to kind of replicate what good looks like. And by arming yourself with all those tools, that enables you to make decisions and grow your business. So I'd say, anything that touches the home, I mean, it's not going anywhere. AI can't, at least yet, put shingles on your roof, go downstairs and clean out your furnace.
Jackhammer concrete.
It's coming at some point.
Jackhammer, put in drain tile, and haul out a water heater that's that's got I don't know how many pounds of corrosion in it, right? Like, that's not going away. But how we deliver that solution is changing, and you got to basically adapt and change.
Yeah, Terry, the day that AI walks into our studio and starts drinking our beer, I'm gonna be pissed, bro.
No, but there will be a robot getting us a beer at some point.
Yeah, that poor thing.
Yes,
man, it's gonna be like we're gonna be throwing beer cans at it and everything. Christian, back to this, because there's a lot of, well, you mentioned like Groundworks before. We got Groundworks, we got Rotunda, we got Summit Park, we've got Landmark Foundation Group. We've got a lot just in our foundation repair space, but I don't think it's the rule. I think it's just some of the voices are louder, but we do hear some people saying, yeah, they sold it and they said it's really not going well. And I think there's a variety of reasons why owners, they feel that way, or some that's worked through the gossip mill. But what are the major reasons you find that that's kind of at the other side of it, that owners feel that way?
Yeah. Well, not to have a shameless plug here, but
no, go for it. We're fine with that.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Full release. This is something that happens, typically, right? Once in your lifetime in terms of an exit or an acquisition or selling your business. And I mean, I certainly wouldn't hire an investment banker to come and basically, secure my wall down in my basement and put in a, drain tile and a sump pump basin. Why would I, try to basically negotiate and do a deal by myself? So making sure that doing a deal on the private side is fine. But one of the things that we do, right, is like, we're going to evaluate all the different options and think of us as kind of I can't remember what the name of the show was, but we're going to figure out who is going to be, the right compatible fit for your business. Right. And through a process of elimination and kind of going down, kind of our process and tailoring it to the unique needs of the business owner. For example, like there might be somebody within the business that we want to transition it to. He's been working with me a long time. I want to make sure that person is there. Well, certain groups, they already have like, a GM, or so to speak. I'm just kind of putting scenarios out there. Maybe they already have, another business kind of in that market that's running really well. So they're not going to need kind of that overhead. So that's potentially going to be, a synergy, or, hey, we maybe can consolidate and kind of do a kind of combine forces, right? And eliminate some of those managerial positions, right? Whereas if, hey, I've got a long-term person that I want to reward and I think he can take on the business and go from there with a partner. Well, why would I sell this group versus like it's a family office like that has a long-term horizon? It's like a buy and hold group. And we have, it's all about finding that right fit. And I think that's what gets undervalued in the role that we play in a transaction, is making sure that, the personalities and the partner that you're signing up with is the right fit, not just from a dollar value. At the end of the day, well, like, Terry, when we get down to, we're running a wide process, so we get down to 3, the dollar value, pretty much like we can kind of control that. It's either, you got to be at this level or you're out, but the group really likes you and wants to go with you. And if it's another $1 million, like they'll find a way to get it done. Right. Like,
right.
At that point, once you find the right group, that's the most important thing. And, that gets, the value and the enterprise value, kind of becomes a moot point, but it's getting to that level where, you're finding that kind of perfect match. And I'd say that would be, for my estimation, would be kind of, why do some of these go wrong, is because what I was signing up for, whether it's terms, conditions, I mean, you guys know these contracts are about sometimes 100+ pages, right? A purchase agreement.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's a lot there, right? And if you don't,
and owners and sellers read every word, I swear. I want to be clear. Like, it is painful,
and they want their attorney
yeah.
to like, and they don't want to pay their attorney for like the hours to explain it to them. So
yep, they
exactly.
Yeah, it is worth
it's kind
the
of
time.
going through that.
Will, what I feel confident about this conversation though is that I'm good for us to sell part of this podcast to private equity at this point in time, because I feel like we're making the right choice.
Yeah, actually, hold on, Christian. You could set us up. I know you're out of the industry. We were talking about sponsors before. And listen, we need a contact at like Yingling or Anheuser-Busch or something. Like, we'll work for beer. But no, I'm glad you said that, Christian, because I think a lot of companies also forget that if it's not the right time now, a lot of the good ones will court and help you along the way to get you to a level, like the buyers will.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I get to work with tons of them through our platform, which is kind of cool because I get to see how they operate. And I see them working with companies that maybe missed an opportunity in 2022, but they're like, hey, listen, let's just work with you. Here's some resources, because what they're doing is they're grooming them up to the point where when that acquisition does happen, they seamlessly can join. And it's just
100%.
like, and it's helping their valuation too. And they know
Yep.
more about the people and the relationships, because I know it's easy to say that there's, in a transaction like this, there's not relationships. And I know Chris Brown does not probably listen to my podcast, but he's a good friend of mine. He sold his business up in New England to a competitor of mine, Groundwork specifically. But we're still good friends. And when we were on that panel together, he's like, listen, the first thing he opened up with, and it was kind of cool. There were 6 other private equity firms in there and a ton of owners. And he said, listen, this is an intimate thing. Like when you sell your business, you have your reasons for it. It's incredibly intimate. And, you know, you do it for your own reasons and you own it. But don't hate anybody for selling their business to who or whatever, because there's just a lot of pride in a lot of these acquisitions too. I respect Chris for that because we've been good friends for years, and it's proven pretty
Yep.
cool to see that evolution. So
It is honestly interesting because some of the conversations, a lot of what you all have been talking about for the past bit, you know, the business owners that come in that are considering transitions with private equity or sales, or, you know, they have, and now that private equity is looking at picking up competitors within that market and reproducing their model in multiple stages. It's interesting to see multiple sides of that conversation from what I've seen on the podcast, Will, with you, or talking with you, Christian, just today.
yeah, and this was something I thought of, and it didn't segue with the conversation, Christian. But I want to ask it
Yeah.
before the show's over. But you know, since there are a small collective group of PE firms that maybe just aren't good in this side of the industry, and they're struggling to either get the cash returns or get distributions of their LPs in their fund, is there an opportunity to purchase their portfolio companies to help their liquidity, things like that? Do you see that happen?
So sometimes yes, and I think that can. I mean, we've seen it in a really good example is here. It's a local company called Donato's. And so I'm taking a step out of home services and getting into pizza. So
Mhm.
Donato's is a well-known business kind of in the central Ohio area, and family-owned business, been in kind of headquartered in Columbus for a long time, very good stewards of the big Ohio State sponsors, et cetera. Not a lot of people know this, but they were acquired by McDonald's, and Chipotle was as well, or had an investment
What?
from yeah, and so they sold to McDonald's. McDonald's is good at burgers and fries and Coca-Cola and soft drinks, right? And this was in kind of, I think, back in the heyday when, Wall Street was pushing McDonald's to like branch out of whatever and kind of take their franchise model to these other industries, and it didn't go very well. And so,
Yeah.
then Donato's had an opportunity, the family, with their proceeds from the first sale to McDonald's, basically, bought it for, I don't know what the number was, but it was, I don't know, some sort of cents on the dollar to kind of take it back. And then they've since kind of rebuilt it to, a really strong kind of brand and business, in Central Ohio. So like that's a really good example of like, hey, there's an opportunity here. You guys, you missed it. You didn't do the X, Y, and Z. And hey, you know what? We'll take it back. Potentially that could be. So I always say like, hey, you kind of go back to your comment, like, selling your business is a pretty intimate thing. At the same time, like I would say, don't burn any bridges, right? At the end of the day, it is a business transaction kind of first, because that's what you're doing. But at the same time, like, hey, there could be an opportunity to jump in. And I think, to your comment about, hey, what, sold my business to private equity and it's not going so well, right? Well, I think a lot of the investors kind of came into like, some of these nascent home services businesses like foundation repair, roofing, gutters, pressure washing.
Yeah, pressure washing, big movement in pressure washing the last few years.
I mean, you name it, right? Like, anything that kind of touches the home, right? And those are different models than like, hey, my furnace is broken, come fix it. And I send a tech that's gone through, six,
Years of training.
there's a stair step of training in order for them to do that job effectively. They're trying to apply that same model like to some of these other ones, and it's a different industry. It's got different dynamics, and so that same strategy that maybe worked really well over here, it's not maybe it doesn't work well in a different type of home service industry. So there's the adapt and kind of figure this out piece, which is in the first kind of 2 to 3 years. Once they get it right, they'll get it right eventually, because if they don't make money, then they don't get more money to invest. And it's kind of the purest form of capitalism, out there. Is like, hey, you eat what you kill. And if you don't deliver a return, you're not going to get funding to try to do a return, but again, down the road. So like, there's a lot of that we've kind of seen. And I think that's one of the, again, kind of pointing back to having an advisor that like, I mean, we've known you guys, I've known about you for a long time now in kind of the space. And I've been doing, in the foundation repair space now for 5 years plus, knowing kind of the business model, what the different nuances are. I mean, an HVAC tech's they're not drilling a 1-ton helical pier into the ground to load, and maybe that's not the right terminology.
They are working with combustible gas though.
Yeah, that is true.
Well, I would say there's some crawl space guys out there saying that I'm working with combustible gas underneath the house every day with Earl over there. But I hope he made it all the way through. But Jeff Tiller, I know, is a good friend of ours from TrueCast Pro. And you got a shout out over Jeff on our 100th episode about favorite episodes. And Drake was like, that was my favorite episode. So hopefully you're rubbing that into Jeff's face every time you talk to him. I mean, poor Jeff. Sorry, Jeff. I love you, Jeff. You're a great guy. You got a cool product. And sorry you didn't make the list on our top 100, but we were 5 beers deep in that day. So, I'm sorry if we left off a few, but nevertheless, Christian, you're such a wealth of knowledge to the industry. I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate what you're doing for my industry, but also just home services in general. And Terry, I don't know if I told you, I'm hoping to have Christian do kind of some weekly updates for our listeners, including like little snippet commercial breaks to help, like, hey, if you want to prepare, here's a little 1.5 minute like tool tip. And man, I'm looking forward to that to help bring value to our now 6 listeners. And I make a joke.
Let's try to get that to 8, and we'll be all set.
Yeah.
There has to be some value somewhere, Will.
Hey man, I know there's more of you out there, and I know we like to poke that joke around and have fun with it. But either way, Terry, I'm glad to have you back, sir. Christian, thanks for sticking around with us for another hour. Man, we'll plan on doing this, at least every 8 months. Well, no, I guess we're 6-7 months apart from our last one. So I appreciate everything you do. To you tradies out there, listen, if you need to get a hold of Christian, we'll put the show notes down there. But otherwise, we'll see you next week in another episode of Beers with Contractors. Peace.
See ya.
Thanks, guys.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Beers with Contractors. We hope you enjoyed our chat as much as we did. Before we say our final goodbyes, a friendly reminder. Beers with Contractors encourages responsible drinking. If you choose to enjoy a beverage during our time together, please do so in moderation and only if you're of legal drinking age in your country or state. Furthermore, the advice and insights shared in this podcast are for informational purposes only. Always consult with professionals and experts in your field, and be sure to follow local laws and regulations regarding licensing and permits. We're here to help, entertain, and inspire, but your safety and compliance are important. So, as you head out into the world of construction and contracting, remember to build responsibly and make decisions that stand the test of time. Thanks for joining us today. We'll catch you on the next episode of Beers with Contractors. Until then, cheers to your success.